I looked in the mirror handed to me by my husband, but the reflection did not follow me at once. There was a delay, barely a heartbeat, but enough to make my heart pause. That was the first time I understood something was wrong, and I had not even gotten inside the house yet. The mirror was small, silver-backed, delicate, the kind a lady might keep hidden in her glove. But the mirror did not behave like any other mirror I had known. It was cold in a way that did not belong to a metal, as though it had forgotten the warmth of human reflection entirely. And the mirror is all that now remains of the house. They say the estate burned to the ground in 1862, that nothing survived but ash, bone, and rumors. They say the Duchess who lived there lost her voice to grief, but they were wrong. My voice was not lost, it was taken and kept. No one who entered the house remained unchanged, least of all, me. Before all of this, before the silence, before the glass, before him, I was Elowen Hardin. And in those days, I was known for something far more dangerous than beauty. I was seen. I was not just merely looked at. I had a kind of presence that filled the room without effort. Conversation slowed when I entered. Men forgot their sentences. Women adjusted their postures without knowing why. It was not vanity. I did not chase attention. It came, and I had grown accustomed to it. Perhaps too accustomed. My family held a standing enough to command respect, though not enough to ignore strategy. Suitors came, of course, but none worthy of the alliance my parents desired. I was patient, or so I believed, until one day I noticed him. He did not approach me, he did not speak. In fact, I cannot recall a single instance which he looked at me directly. The Duke, Alistair Viremont, old money, older influence, a man whose wealth was drawn not from lands or titles alone, but from the silver mines carved deep into the earth. His forte were optics, telescopes, lenses, mirrors, instruments designed to observe without being observed. He was rarely present in society, yet when he was, something about him unsettled the air. Conversation sharpened, laughter thinned. He stood on the edge of the room like a man who had no need to belong there because he already understood everything within them. And always, he positioned himself where there was glass, a mirror, a polished table, a curve of a champagne flute. That was how he watched me, not as I was, but as I appeared. He never looked at me directly, only the versions of me I could not control. I should have found this strange. Instead, I ignored it. Until the day he asked for me, not in a manner of courtship, not through letters or dances or whispers of admiration. He requested me. And just as the weight of that understanding began to settle, this is where I must pause. Psychologically, we are drawn to being seen and to be noticed. But in the 19th century, for women like Elowen, being seen was never about freedom. Hi loves, welcome to my channel. Please stay till the end of this video because I promise you, it's totally worth it. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to this channel. The day of the proposal, if I could call it that, was delivered in a room that smelled of polished wood and mild oud. My parents were present. That alone told me everything. There were no flowers or rehearsed gentleness, not even an attempt to soften what was at its core a transaction. He spoke to my parents in hushed tones and then walked to me, composed as ever, his voice even more precise. You will never be misseen again. That was all. There were no declarations or questions, just an assurance. Or a warning? My parents accepted before I could fully respond. Their relief was not hidden. A match of such power and certainty was not to be declined. And I, though not foolish, was still young enough to believe I could remain untouched by something I did not understand. So I agreed, not for love, but for alignment. The wedding was immaculate, the kind of ceremony that satisfies society without revealing the truth. There was silk, glass, applause, 1,000 eyes watching, and yet for the first time in my life, I felt strangely unseen, because he did not even look at me, not once. The journey to his estate took us north, where the air sharpened and the land seemed to hold its breath. The manor revealed itself slowly through the mist, vast, pale, almost impossibly still. It did not feel like a home, it felt like something waiting. The doors opened without a sound, servants moved quietly, expressions so neutral to the point of absence. No curiosity or warmth, only awareness. And then I saw it. Glass. It was everywhere. Walls, corridors, ceilings framed with silver panels. It did not look decorative or ornamental. It looked deliberate, as though the house itself had been constructed not to shelter, but to observe. That night, my wedding night, I was led to a chamber where every surface reflected me endlessly. 1,000 versions of myself stretched in every direction, each one watching, each one perfectly still. He stood behind me, not close enough to touch, but near enough that I could feel the weight of his presence. "You're not meant to be heard," he said quietly, "only witnessed, and what is witnessed must be preserved." His hand slowly rose and placed a velvet ribbon around my neck. It was soft, almost gentle, until I tried to speak. Nothing came out, not a whisper or a breath shaped into a sound. It was silence, complete and absolute silence. Panic surged within me, but he had nowhere to go, no voice to carry it. Only reflections in their dozens watched me realize all at once that I had no longer belonged to myself. The days that followed did not feel like days at all. They felt like an observation. Servants moved around me without greeting eyes. At first, I believed it was deference. I felt it was respect. Until I noticed they were looking at me, but not directly. It was always through glass. The reflection on the wall, the faint image in a polished tray, the curve of the window. It was not avoidance, it was obedience. When I finally confronted him with my silence, my hands were trembling, my throat felt useless. He answered, though explaining something simple. "People are most honest," he said, "when they forget they are being seen." His gaze even then was not on me, but on my reflection behind him. I began to understand that I was no longer the one being admired, I was now the one being studied. The rules of the house revealed themselves not through announcements, but through consequences. No visitors, no letters without inspections, no mirrors left uncovered, and the number one rule above all others: I must never, ever interfere with what the mirror remembered. That was how he phrased it. I thought to myself that it was a strange way to instruct me not to break a mirror, but I could only air my concerns in my head, not aloud. At night, the house changed. The silence deepened. The air cooled in ways that it did not belong to the weather, and reflections began to behave differently. At first, it was subtle. I felt my feet turn ice when I first noticed it. It was a delay. A tilt of the head did not match my own. A slight stillness where there should have been movement. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe my mind lied to me. Until I turned and I saw myself still watching forward, waiting. That was a night I understood the mirrors were not passive. They were not reflections. They were something else. There was a maid, one of the few who dared linger long enough to be noticed. She moved differently, as if less controlled, as though she remembered what it was to exist outside of rules. As I lived and breathed, she vanished one morning. There was neither an announcement nor explanation, only absence. When I asked in desperate gestures, demanding to know her whereabouts, I was only told quietly, "She interfered." I saw her once more days later in a corridor lined with glass. She walked and breathed, but no reflections seemed to follow her. There was not a single focus on her eyes, yet her movements were precise, but empty, as though something essential had been removed, leaving only the outline of a person behind. Upon gazing on this observation, my face instantly turned white. My hands and feet trembled with piercing icy feeling. That was when my fears stopped being a feeling and became a certainty. Instinctively, I began covering the mirrors. At first, the small ones, a cloth over a frame, a curtain drawn slightly too far. Each time, they were uncovered again. Not violently, they were just restored as though my attempts never occurred. Until one evening, I stood before him, rage and terror burning in silence, as I managed to gather my voice with the adrenaline of fear that coursed through my veins, and demanded an answer with everything I had left. His response did not change. "I did not imprison you," he said. He stepped closer then, for the first time looking, but not at me. He looked at the reflection we shared. "The world consumes what it admires," he continued softly. "I ensured you would remain untouched." That was when I saw it. It was not cruelty, it was his conviction. He truly believed this, and that made him far more dangerous than any monster I would have imagined. Winter arrived, and so he opened the manor. It was not fully, but just enough. Guests returned for the opening, music filled the halls, forced caution laughter echoed through the rooms that had forgotten how to hold it. And that was when I first saw him, Lord Henry. He was an artist brought by Alistair. He was beautiful. He had blue eyes that made you feel as though you were swimming in the ocean. His jaw sharply carved, yet complemented with soft and delicate lips. He was observant, and unlike anyone else in that house, he was full of life and beauty. He looked at me, not at my reflection or my posture. He really looked at me. It was disarming, terrifying and relieving all at once. He was here for a few days' appointment to paint my portrait. He moved his brush on canvas like a beauty god as he watched my every detail, my eyes, lips, hands, even my hair strands as he caressed my face. I felt as if my blood turned extra warm as it coursed through my body. But as the days passed, I noticed something else. Henry hesitated near the mirrors. He studied them and frowned, as though he saw what others refused to. One afternoon as I sat for him, his voice lowered. "Careful now." He sounded almost afraid. "They don't always follow you," he said. I stilled. My heart, silent as it was, seemed to echo in my chest. He had seen it. He had understood. And in that moment, something bloomed inside me as I now knew I was not imagining things. We met inside the garden once, just once, where the glass did not entirely reach and my reflections could not follow. This was the one place I was not allowed to freely roam. The air moved differently there. The wind touched my skin without feeling like I was being observed. For the first time since my marriage, I felt unmeasured. Henry spoke gently and carefully. He did not speak to me as one addressing an object, but a person. And though I could not answer, I did not need to, because for that brief moment, I existed. And that was enough. Until it wasn't, because somewhere within the house, Alistair Viremont was watching, and for the first time, he saw something missing. My reflection. My reflection was missing at the exact moment I spent time with Henry. This shattered something inside him. I did not see it happen at first, but I felt it. The house changed. It was subtle. The air grew heavier as though the walls themselves had begun to breathe differently. Servants moved much faster. Doors closed more carefully. Even mirrors seemed to hold their reflection a second too long. That night, I was summoned. He never summoned me by word. Only a single ribbon had been left upon my dressing table this time. It was black, not the velvet red, folded with precise intent. I immediately understood. When I entered the great hall of mirrors, the house no longer resembled a home. It became something else entirely. It looked ritualistic. Every candle burned so steadily, as though the flames themselves had been instructed not to flicker. And at the center of it all, he stood. He was still as a brick, yet composed as ever. He was unrecognizable. The man I had come to understand in fragments. The restraints, the control, the quiet intensity had all been stripped away, leaving something far more dangerous in its place. It was neither anger, neither was it madness. It was pure conviction. "You have forced my hand," he said almost gently. I could not answer, but I did not need to. My silence had never stopped him from hearing what he wished. He gestured, and immediately my eyes saw it. The master mirror. It was larger than any other, framed in carved silver so intricate it seemed alive. The surface did not reflect the room as the others did. It held something deeper, something darker, like water had forgotten how to ripple. "You fear what I have built," he continued, stepping closer, his voice low and steady, "because you mistake preservation for imprisonment." My pulse quickened, though my body remained still. He reached out, not to touch me, but to gesture towards the mirror. "They will age," he said. "They will wither. They will be misremembered, misrepresented, reduced to stories told by lesser minds." He gave a pause. "But you?" His voice softened, smothered in blackness. "You will remain." Something cold settled in my chest. My stomach crunched so tight I could barely breathe. "You will not be touched by decay, nor distortion, nor by any crude interpretations of men who do not deserve to see you." His eyes met mine then. It truly met them for the first time since I had known him. And you will never belong to anyone else again. It was not a threat, it was a promise. I instantly understood in that moment that he was not trying to keep me. He was trying to keep the idea of me buried deep inside the mirror. The realization snuck deeper than fear ever could, because there was no cruelty now. There was only purpose. Within the heat and cold of that moment, behind me, I heard it. A faint and desperate sound, footsteps hurried and uneven. It was Henry. He entered the hall like a man stepping into a dream he already knew would end badly. His coat damp from the night air, his breath unsteady, his eyes fixed not on the mirrors, but on me. Elowen, he said my name, breaking against the silence, like something fragile as it echoes. Alistair did not turn. "You're too late," he remarked, almost idly. Henry stepped forward. "Let her go." It was a quiet request, and it was useless where Alistair was. He smiled faintly. "You mistake the nature of what is happening." "She's not to be taken," Alistair said. "She's being secured." Henry's jaw tightened. "She's not an object." "No," Alistair replied softly. "She's far more valuable than that." The tension in the room became unbearable. It felt like stretching thin as a glass under pressure. And then, I heard a soul-piercing glass-shattering sound. It was Henry. He moved first, seizing a candelabrum and hurling it into the nearest mirror. The sound was so violent, scraping through my eardrums. The glass exploded outwards in a spray of silver and light. For a heartbeat, every single thing stopped, even the reflections. As I still bathed in shock, echoes erupted. The mirrors began to actively react. Cracks spread across the surface like veins. The reflections began to move independently. They were not like in a mimicking or following manner. The house itself seemed to recoil. Alistair's composure did not merely fracture, it snapped violently like an iron strained beyond its limits. The stillness drained from him in an instant, replaced by something far more dangerous than anger. "You should not have done that," he said, but no longer quiet. His voice cut through the hall, sharp and echoing, reverberating against the mirror walls, until it seemed as though a frozen version of him spoke at once. Henry reached me, his hands closing firmly around mine, steady and grounding. "Come with me, we have to go," urgency breaking through every word. I moved towards him, but Alistair moved faster. He did not cross the floor like a regular man, he cut through it. One moment, he stood near the master mirror. The next, he was between us, his hands striking Henry's wrist with a brutal precision. The force broke our grip instantly. A sharp crack echoed as Henry staggered back. "You presume," Alistair said coldly, stepping forward, "that you could take away what's mine." Henry recovered quickly, his breath sharp, and his eyes burning with recklessness, laced with resolve. "She's not yours." The words landed harder than any blow. For a fraction of a second, something unreadable passed through Alistair's expression. Then he struck. It was a controlled violence, the kind with intention meant to destabilize someone. His fist collided with Henry's jaw, sending him backwards into the mirror panels. The glass trembled violently, a crack splintering outward like lightning frozen in place. I gasped, stepping forward instinctively. "Elowen, stay back," Henry managed, pushing himself upright despite the impact. Alistair did not look at me. He did not bother to, for his entire focus had narrowed down to one singular objective: to remove the interference. Henry lunged forward this time, grabbing a fallen metal stand from the shattered candelabrum and swinging it with desperate intent. Alistair cut the motion halfway, gripping the metal rod with one hand. For a moment, they held there, locked in force. Then Alistair twisted. The metal tore Henry's grasp with a screech, flung aside by Alistair as though weightless. He stepped in closer, faster than Henry anticipated, driving him backwards again, this time into another mirror. The glass shattered inwardly on impact. Fragments fell like silver rain, but the reflection inside lagged, distorting and stretching unnaturally as Henry pushed himself free. For the first time, Alistair visually faltered in one of the unbroken mirrors. His reflection did not match him. It moved a fraction too late, a fraction too wrong. And Henry saw it. Without hesitation, he grabbed a jagged shard of broken mirror from the floor and drove it, not into Alistair, but into the nearest standing panel beside him. The effect was immediate. A violent ripple tore through the hall. Every mirror responded. Cracks burst outward across the surfaces, reflections splitting, duplicating, and misaligning. The perfect order Alistair had built had begun to collapse in real time. No! Alistair stepped back in confusion and disruption. Stop! But Henry didn't. He struck another and another, each impact louder than the last, each fracture unraveling something deeper, something unseen. The house groaned, not structurally, but internally. Alistair surged forward again, but this time, there was something different in his movements. There was less control and more urgency. He grabbed Henry by the collar, slamming him against the marble columns with a force that knocked the air from his lungs. You have no comprehension of what you're destroying, he snapped. His voice no longer measured, no longer composed. Henry struggled, breath ragged, but his gaze didn't waver. I understand enough, he said hoarsely. She's not meant to live like this. Alistair's grip tightened. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed he might break Henry. But behind him, the mirrors continued to fracture. The reflections no longer obeyed. Some stood still, some moved too soon, some did not resemble us at all. It was all ocular chaos. Alistair hesitated. It was not because of Henry, but because of the house. That was the moment Henry used to drive his shoulder forward, breaking free just enough to twist out of Alistair's grip. Grabbing my hand again, this time with no interruption. Now, he said, breathless and urgent. Let's go. I did not look back, because behind us, something had already begun to collapse. We ran with all the strength we could gather, through corridors that no longer obeyed logic, through halls where reflections lagged behind or surged ahead. The sound of shattering glass followed us like thunder. Servants fled, doors slammed. Somewhere, a woman screamed and then stopped too abruptly. Behind us, Alistair did not chase. He did not need to. The house was this observatory sanctuary, or had been, until we broke it. We reached the grey stair just as the first flame appeared. It was small at first, then it grew hungry. Oil lamps overturned in the chaos. Curtains caught. Polished wood drank the fire greedily, feeding it upwards and outwards. The manor of mirrors began to burn. The flames reflected endlessly, multiplying across every surface until it seemed as though the entire world had been set alight. We stumbled into the night air, the cold striking like a shock to the lungs. Behind us, the manor roared. It was alive, yet dying at once. Henry pulled me farther away from it, but I did not look away, because in the highest window, I saw him, Alistair, standing before the master mirror, standing still, watching the fire as though he had witnessed the collapse of something sacred. Just right then, the glass behind him shifted, closing like a surface swallowing what stood before it. His figure immediately blurred and distorted, and just like that, he was gone. The flames consumed the rest. By morning, there was nothing left but ruin, charred stones, melted silver, and silence. History said we died there, that the Duke and his Duchess were lost to the fire, along with the madness that had taken root in the house. Well, history must-tell truths. I lived. I ran far away from that place with Henry beside me, but with something missing within me. It was not my voice. That had returned the moment the manor shattered. It was something much more different. When I look into glass now, I did not see myself entirely. There was always a delay, a tiny absence, a space where something should be, and Alistair kept it somewhere within whatever remains of the cursed manor. He kept the version of me that belonged to him, and perhaps that was the price of living. And if you were to ask me now, after all of it, whether I would return for what I had lost, I would not, because what remains is mine, and that is enough. Alistair kept every version of me except the one that chose to live. He believed that if he could control how I was seen, he could control what I was, and perhaps in his world, he was right. But we do not live in glass anymore, or perhaps we do, but just differently. In today's world of social media and digital reflections, his madness feels strangely modern, doesn't it? So is it better to be seen and owned in a manor of gold and glass, or to be invisible and free in the shadows? Please let me know your thoughts about this beautiful story in the comments, and if you stayed until the end, it tells me you aren't like the others who prefer polished, sanitized versions of history. You love the deep underneath, just like I do. I have thousands of ledgers in this library. If you want to be the first to see what I pull out from the vault next, you need to join our circle of confidence by subscribing and turning on post notifications so you don't miss our next post. Thank you so much for watching. It means to me more than you know. Bye.